Hello, and welcome to SaksWorks. We are so excited today, in particular, to have these two fantastic experts with us, Anushay Hossain, Kimberly Seals Allers, who are both crack experts in women's health, maternal health, Black maternal health, and how to fix maternal health in this country. We're here to talk about Anushay's new book, The Pain Gap, How Sexism and Racism in Healthcare Kill Women. That is a daunting title. She has assured us that it is also prescriptive for how we can do better. Kimberly is the founder of the Irth App, also the founder of Black Breastfeeding Week, a foremost expert in this field. At the last conference we were at together, pre-pandemic, she was absolutely mobbed like a rock star. We're so excited to have both of them today for this very important conversation. And this is the kind of programming that we like to have at SaksWorks. We are a new kind of membership club for work and life, for deciding how we want to live, working in a beautiful environment with plants that gently caress the top of your head, provide oxygen, very important.
Yes.
And we have wellness programming, fitness programming, and intellectual, cultural, social programming like this that we're really just so fortunate to have these experts here today. I'm so proud to be presenting this conversation, and I can't wait to learn from you. So without further ado, I will let you both take it away.
Thank you so much. This is so exciting, and I have to just say on the side that I have been such a big fan of the Irth App, and when you guys posted about my book, and I think one of my articles, I was like, I did it.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, the work that you're doing is so important. We have to be looking at these issues through so many intersections.
Well, what I really wanted to talk to you about is that what I always like to say about maternal health is that people think this is so daunting and depressing and no one wants to hear about it, but I'm like, no, everybody should want to hear about it. It's actually a challenge and a crisis that is solvable. It's not AIDS, it's not cancer. We already have the tools, we've had the tools for so long. Something went seriously wrong along the way. And what I love about what you do is that you're like, here is the solution. So talk to me about your app.
Thank you so much. Well, I've been in this work for a while, and, I was really grateful to have time to be on the ground speaking to people on the community, funded by the Kellogg Foundation to go to like Birmingham, Alabama, Jackson, Mississippi, Louisiana, and really trying to take a question. Remember, I'm a journalist by trade, right? So, but I felt like the community had answers, right? And that there's this approach that we need to go to medical science and research and journals. All of those are important. But what about the people who are actually experiencing it? Right?
Women have the answers.
Exactly. They may actually have some solution if only you listen.
No one listens.
No one wants to listen because we have this hierarchy that says who are the experts, who is really smart, and
who is white and male that we can make the expert.
I don't know. And then who are the black and brown folks that we can make the targets?
There aren't any.
Right. So in that work of me literally knocking on doors in all these communities asking the question, one of the things that was clear to me was that the community had answers, right? They had solutions. But the other thing was that I kept hearing the same stories from the black and brown folks around what they were experiencing, dismissiveness of their pain levels, diagnostic tests being delayed, being yelled at, threatened, dismissiveness, just this whole spectrum of harm. And it dawned on me that all of these stories were similar and the same, yet different, and I needed to put them all in one place.
Yes.
So I really created Irth as a digital platform for us to share collectively our experiences for birthing people, prenatal, birthing, postpartum, but then on the back end, we turn those stories into data to actually better inform medical care because they haven't been listening to the people most being harmed by the system.
And then people are always like, well, how do you know? How do you know it's not a one-off or a bad apple? And now we have the data.
That's right.
Which proves what women have always been saying. We're not believed about our bodies. Our pain is not believed. We have no credibility.
We're hysterical. Did you know?
Yeah, that is actually, can I tell you? We are hysterical.
Yeah.
That is what I wanted. I really thought, I didn't win and the title ended up being better, but I really wanted to call the book Hysterical because that is what we are always called or afraid of being called or afraid of being labeled as. And I mean, at one point while I was writing the book, I actually asked myself, is it always like this? Is it always like this? Women just never have any credibility about our bodies, no authority. Were we always not believed? And guess what? Yes, the answer is yes to the ancient Egyptians, to the ancient Greeks. What the?
Interesting that when we think about, as well historically, the ways that midwives, right? So there were woman-led models that were a little bit better, right? And, this idea that women actually help women give birth, and it was communal, and there are ancient Egyptian drawings of, assistance at birth, and carvings in caves and places I don't go, but we know that it was never a lonely experience. But when birth became medicalized by those same very knowing white male-dominated medical field, something shifted, right? And it wasn't a communal experience. It wasn't about being supported by your family. It was about now medical interventions, and now you need to have this and that and surgery, right?
Yes.
And now we realize that the majority of U.S. women are giving birth with the help of a surgeon. That really makes no sense.
Yeah, it really makes no sense. And it's so important. I think a lot of times people are like, oh, again, it's about race. But when we talk about maternal health, we have to look at race in America, because it's not just small disparities. Disparities are out of control. We often hear that women of color are 2 to 3 times more likely to die in childbirth. But for African American women, that is 243% more likely. So, pre-pandemic, people used to say really racist things. They still do. But pre-pandemic, it was worse. They'd be like, oh, well, this is because Black people are less educated or welfare queens and whatnot. But now we know the pandemic has shown us that it's racism and not race that are driving these factors. And I love that you brought up midwifery, because I feel like a really big problem what happened in America is maternal health, healthcare in general, and giving birth in America, is that women have been completely taken out of the factor. I mean, I grew up in Bangladesh. We had so many problems. America helped take us from one of the most dangerous places in the world to give birth to a development star. And something I think that is so interesting is that even though we have problems today, even in Bangladesh, giving birth and becoming a mother is not a lonely process. Like, the whole community will come. We are a patriarchal society and we have a lot of problems. But I think it's so interesting how giving birth and becoming motherhood in America is so isolating. It's so mean and cruel. And can I tell you, every woman you're on your own. You gotta figure it out. Some women have some cash on the side, some women have, something else, but every woman is on their own. We don't have any paid leave.
We don't have any legally mandated paid leave. We're the only industrialized nation that does not have paid leave. And I think what you're saying about this experience has become normalized, right? And so now you have these older women who are mothers who are now looking at, the next generation, like, well, I never had paid leave and I survived and I had to do this. And I'm like, we should be striving for something better. That whole experience should not be something that we have normalized and accepted and then judge people when they are actually saying, maybe we should ask for better, right? Yeah. The truth of the matter is that the system failed you, and you never should have had to birth in those circumstances or be forced to return to work or all the other things that our foremothers dealt with. And that our goal is to improve that experience, not to be stuck. And what we see statistically is that we have made pretty much zero improvements overall in maternal mortality for our country, where we are, behind many, lesser industrialized nations, and then lacking paid leave, which is, now we have 25% of U.S. women going back to work 10 days after childbirth. I mean, you barely even heal. It's ridiculous.
No.
And so we don't really honor mothering as important work.
Or
caregiving.
I think the pandemic has really shown us that. And who's doing the majority of caregiving, right?
Right.
Whether you want to or not.
Right.
Your elderly parents, your kids, it falls on women. And I feel like a large reason we don't value caregiving is because women do it. And they've been doing it unpaid and quietly for so long. But something that people always ask me is why I always harp on about maternal health. And that there's so many other women's health issues, which is very true, and that's in my book as well. Chronic health, endometriosis, heart disease. But the reason I keep coming back to maternal health is because the World Health Organization actually says that maternal health is an indicator not only of women's overall position in society, how well your healthcare system is working. Because once again, it tells us how many women are dying in childbirth, but it also tells us what the heck. No woman should be dying giving birth, right? We know what to intervene, we know what's needed. The thing that's happened in America also is that it's become the business of giving birth in America, and C-sections being the most common surgery in the country. And also, people don't know this, I had 2 C-sections.
Same.
And I never was told that A, I had a choice of not having one, and B, that it is a really major surgery. Because people did expect you to be up in 2 weeks. So I tried to be up in 2 weeks.
Right. Like, no, but actually, I was just gutted like
That's
a
another
fish.
story. Yes, gutted like nobody tells you.
No one
and
tells
everyone
you.
is
It's
always like, oh,
surgery.
it's so much easier, and you're in and out. And I'm like, okay, well maybe I just have pain. It took me 18 months to get feeling bad.
Wow.
In my stomach, they don't tell you that. They just like, and if it's an emergency C-section, right? They just open you up. If it's a scheduled one, they might take some time moving those tissues. But no one tells you.
No one tells you that, and I think that this fact that we have normalized that, where so many people, some people actually choosing it for convenience, because which is fine, but you need to understand that it's major surgery.
And you are not going to be given the time to heal. People forget just all surgery in general, it's the recovery.
Right.
And you are really sent home alone for that.
Yeah.
But I want to also go back to midwifery really quick, because African American women had such a long history with midwifery. And then at the turn of the century, when it all became about hospital birth was presented as cleaner, right, better, safer, and then it became, of course, very racialized. Like, would you like a white doctor to help you give birth in the hospital, or a dirty old black woman in the back roads of Alabama? Or a dirty brown woman. But you know, a lot of these immigrant women brought these skills, and they are skills from their countries before being, you know, kidnapped and sold in America or trafficked into America. So that's another thing, the women's knowledge and we have been undervalued and dismissed.
Yes, and that, you know, it's pretty scary, because now we are learning that actually those models produce better outcomes. Surprise, surprise. Surprise, surprise. And now there's a movement to try to bring that back. So now even hospitals are trying to bring in midwife. We're in a big movement around doulas, particularly for Black and brown birthing people. But, you know, now it's a full circle moment. But this idea to demonize midwifery, right? To make it what you said, and waste, and then people wanted something that was shiny, right? We all wanted, that was the era of new appliances, and that it was going to be better living with science, not these community people who were doing things
backwards.
Right, exactly. And the question is, where did that get us? Now, as a therapist would say, how's that working out for you?
The richest country, one of the richest countries in the world with the highest maternal mortality rates. I mean, and you know what is so crazy is that I grew up in the 80s in Bangladesh seeing America develop and successfully implement safe motherhood initiatives, women's health initiatives, public health initiatives all over the world. And now I'm like, I feel like sometimes my book is presented as, oh, I was in this poor country and look what happened. But no, it's like, what is happening here? And if it's happening to women in America, the rest of us will be effectively screwed, pardon my French. We really will be. And also through American foreign policy, people forget that policy developed right here in America, in Washington, D.C. actually, by guess who? Majority old white men, impact the health and rights of women and girls around the world. I mean, American foreign policy is so powerful, and it's tied and contingent sometimes to USAID, so it can override, you know, sovereign countries like laws, specifically around abortion.
I mean, right now we're seeing a lot of older white men make legislation about uteruses that they do not have, and it's very concerning. I mean, it feels a bit more of a throwback than a move forward, right? And it's like we hold on to this idea of liberty and freedom and advancement, but in this particular area, we're going backwards. We're not making an advancement. We're actually just kind of repeating things from the who knows what 40s and 50s. It's really a really scary time. I wanted to ask you, like, what were some of the things that really surprised you while you were doing the research and writing on the book?
That's a really great question. You know what really surprised me was the systemic. We know so many things are systemic, but what really surprised me was the systemic exclusion of women from clinical trials in America. To the point that, I mean, some of the stuff that I found, my editor would be like, we're gonna fact check this and then fact check this, and then she was like, is this really true? But women, up until the 1990s, the NIH didn't have a mandate to include women in trials, clinical trials. The majority of mice, to this day, mice patriarchy is real. Okay? The majority of people who suffer from chronic pain are women, but the majority of mice that we test chronic pain treatment on are male. So, but it's so interesting. It's just like someone decided that the standard for health should be a middle-aged white guy, and no one challenged this for a really long time. I actually always say that the system is working. The system is actually working. It values certain lives a lot more, right? What lives are those? White, cis, male.
I like to say that the system is broken or the system is fixed, actually, depending on how you look at it, right?
Yes. Well,
so
I always say
for
this
who
exactly.
and fixed against
Fixed
who.
for exactly. So the system is working, but America is changing.
Yeah.
It's not
And
working
also,
for women
I
of
think
color.
that when we think about that issue, which has been so critical, going back to maternal health, because I've been saying we've created this whole maternity care model that was supposedly evidence-based, but nobody asked evidence-based on who.
On who?
Evidence-based on who?
On who?
And this evidence-based that they have been using to create maternal policy has never really included women of color, particularly Black women, and probably mostly mice. So now we're wondering why it's not working.
Yes.
And it's deeply
But
troubling.
once again, we know the answers,
Exactly,
right? And also,
exactly.
from coming back to the whole diversity thing, even the diabetes, what's that finger scanning machine? It is like not trained or not programmed to pick up dark skin.
Dark skin.
It's only supposed to work on like white skin, and same with like some light bulb switches. So this is like a real problem. People always like to say to me, "It's always about race. Why do you make it about race always?" I'm like, it's always
first
about
of all,
race.
You should know that if I go into any bathroom with a sensor and I do this and the water doesn't come on, I'm like racist sensor. It doesn't recognize my dark skin.
Yes.
I have to do this sometimes, right? So it's a real thing that the AI, that even the technology is built to
Because
not,
they only
to
tested
exclude.
on,
They
yeah.
tested
But you know, I
on
always thought the water
non-brown
sensors
people.
were broken.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It could be broken.
The
It could be
system is broken.
It could be broken. You know, my children are like, Mom, it's
You're
not
right,
always
she's
race.
like-
But yeah, many times I have to do this, and this does not work.
My 10-year-old hates that I always make everything about race. I hate to tell her.
That's because it is.
It is.
Yeah. We're trying. But you know,
We're trying.
but these are the nuances of the way it shows up in research, right? In all forms of research, from technology to the science to the health-based research, and it's really, you know, a time for us to demand better. And you know, I feel like there's a lot of things that we're trying to fight for right now. Clearly, we are having our reproductive rights attacked and assaulted. And I'm wondering for you, given this issue, like where do you see this fitting in? And with all the things that we have to get right for women and femmes in this country, how can we help people see the urgency of this piece of it?
That's a really good question. I feel like people always get really overwhelmed, right? Maybe if they're not in this space, or even if they are in this space, women's rights, women's health, global health. But I'm very I get overwhelmed, but I'm also very clear about it. And I feel like the pandemic is giving us a really clear path forward, because it's really shown people in America, but also around the world, how racialized our healthcare is, period.
Right.
Everything. How the pandemic hit, who hit, the racialized effect of the pandemic, the gendered impact of the pandemic. So I feel like we're seeing something very, very important, which is the doctor is not the most important person.
Okay, the doctor
Right?
is not your dictator.
You are, and your healthcare should be a team effort. And what's really great about my book is that it doesn't just, moan and groan about these issues. Those solutions are there because women's rights advocates, feminists, human rights advocates, activists, we know what is needed. No one is listening to women. We know that our stories have to be centered. And I always say that when things are bad for white women, they're really bad for women of color, but they are the worst for Black women. The rates and the statistics are always starkest amongst blacks and whites, and we can't ignore it. I think for a really long time people were so dismissive.
Yeah.
So I feel like the path forward is listen to people of color and women of color. We have some solutions.
We have some solutions, and I mean, and obviously this is the work that I do with Irth, where we try to crowdsource these reviews and turn it into data to work with hospitals so they can learn from Black and brown folks, right? So it's like, how do we use what we're learning in Irth App? People sharing their very real experiences, good, bad, everything in between, but use that to inform this new evidence that really needs to be rooted in the lived experience of care. The other thing that's really interesting that made me think a lot about your book, in Irth, we have a screen. It's a very structured review process. So it's Yelp-like, but it's a very structured process where we ask a lot of questions. And one of those questions is, were your pain levels discussed?
Yes.
Because as you know, the research that was being taught in medical school up until very recently, I think that in the 90s, said that Black people do not experience pain like white people. Like the melanin in our skin, I don't know how they rationalize this.
It's thicker skin and then thicker nerve endings. And there was a 2016 UVA study
That's right.
that found half of white doctors in America, 50%, still think this.
Still think this.
So
And
they under-prescribe and under-treat for Black pain.
That's right. And so in many of the maternal death stories, I'm thinking right now with goosebumps about Kira Johnson, who died at Cedars-Sinai. She was literally in the hospital, had a C-section, saying she was in pain, was being ignored. Her husband was saying she's in pain. She was turning colors. When they finally opened her up in the hospital, 7 liters of blood?
7 liters of blood.
And she died. Right? But consistently, right now within Irth.
At Cedars-Sinai, and such an educated Black woman.
Absolutely.
And you know what Charles always says, Charles Johnson, her amazing husband, always says that he was so scared to, be too aggressive and forthright because he was going to get dismissed as an angry Black man in the hospital.
Exactly. So, damned if you do,
damned if you don't.
But we're seeing this overly reported, right? And so how can we learn, I say to hospitals, how do we learn from the living? I don't want a death to be the trigger for you to figure out what went wrong, right? We have a database of people who are still alive, God bless them, keep hoping, that you can learn from. This idea that death becomes the trigger for analysis is deeply troubling, and we want people to learn from the living. And one of the most important things that we look for on the back end is a frequency of someone saying, my pain levels were dismissed.
Yes.
My pain levels were
repeatedly.
Because that is a red flag.
Yeah.
Because it usually ends in an adverse event. And when that is happening frequently by a provider or at a hospital, we need to pay attention.
Yes.
And so this idea of pain is not just a abstract conversation. It is a notion that has led to too many Black women dying because something as simple as the science said that our pain is different. And so I want to add that to contextualize that this is not about, some kind of soft ideal. This is literally impacting people on a life and death level, particularly Black women.
Yes.
And just want to remind people in this beautiful setting, in our beautiful city, that the Black maternal mortality rate in New York City is up to 12 times higher than whites. In New York City, right?
And by the way, this whole thing of, it's because Black people aren't educated. Now we have data that if you are an educated Black woman with a college degree or higher, you are 5 times more likely to die than a white woman with a high school degree. So it's not about lack of education.
Right.
In fact, it's more dangerous the more educated you are as a woman of color. What the hell? It's so hard for me not to curse, by the way. I'll just keep saying hack.
All right, what more can we expect
What
from
more
the book?
can we expect? From the book? Well, actually, something very exciting now, I'll wrap up, we're running out of time, is what is happening on Capitol Hill, which is something I never get to say, but some really amazing things are happening.
Yes,
we were both actually in the first Maternal Health Summit that Vice President Kamala Harris just held. We have some amazing provisions that passed in the Build Back Better legislation. And I think for the first time, Black maternal health is a serious national, it's been put in the spotlight.
It's been put in the spotlight. And maternal health overall, and we're hoping that all of the provisions in the Omnibus Act, I think it's 12 bills, a few have passed, but we need to get them all passed through the Build Back Better Act.
And really practical things like extending Medicaid.
Right.
So many women die. The majority of American women are dying from 2 months, 8 weeks postpartum. So extending Medicaid coverage is really important, something so practical.
Yeah. And I mean, there were provisions for our military women.
Yes,
So many, a great scope of services. Lots of bills related to how we collect data. To your point, technology. Really hopeful that Earth can be a part of that. So much. So if you have a problematic representative who may be resisting passing this bill, please call. There are lots of great places to follow to learn about the advocacy done. Moms Rising is one of my favorites.
Moms Rising, Every Mother Counts.
Every Mother Counts. Great places to go to join. Sign up. They have very easy tools for you to send a letter, a tweet, or an angry email, which is my preference, to your local representative, and they're kind of made for you. But it's really important that we recognize this as something about all of us.
Yeah.
Everybody came from a mother, right?
Yes, respect
You
your mother,
have one.
guys.
You have one, and you came from one, even if you're not one now. And so
yes, you do.
this is
You have
something.
one, and you came from
You
one.
have one. You came from one, right? So everybody's affected by mothers, and I said this in my book that there is no value you can put on a mother, right? We are both valueless and priceless at the same time,
Yes,
right?
totally.
We are not valued by society, but if you ask anyone, what would you pay for a good mother? No one could give you that
Nobody
number.
can give you
No one can give you that number. And so it's up to us to create that value, and we can do that by using our voices to push for the policy changes that we deserve, the cultural changes that we deserve, and the respect that we
Yes.
deserve. We need some RESPECT on this so that we can be heard and listen to.
Seriously.
Yeah.
But I also want to come back to the policy thing really quick because I feel like people in DC and outside of DC are like, really politics right now on Capitol Hill, and yes, things are very bad. But I will have to tell you, as a policy analyst that spent years on Capitol Hill lobbying, cultural change comes from political change, political will. And it really makes people look up when there's so much legislation on women's health. It really does. People be like, oh, this is something we should care about. The white men's ears perk up.
Mhm.
And it's important that those ears perk up.
Yes. And we want them to listen, not in the space of we have to save Black women
Yes,
or
don't be
the poor
condescending.
people. It's
Poor
really
brown
an
women.
understanding what is called coliberation, right? Like
Yes.
we're all connected. And if you're not free, I'm not free. And if I'm not free, you're not free. So
And
what we're
Namer,
doing is right.
You're not. You are, what?
That's right.
I'm not free until we are all free.
We are all free. And so this idea is not about, where we have to save the poor Black women and the brown folks being harmed. It isn't understanding that we have to save ourselves. And until we get it right for those who are being harmed the most, it's not right for anybody.
Yeah,
It's
and you
not
know what
right for
really
anybody.
hurts me right now that I feel like people still aren't getting? This is the message of the pandemic.
Yeah,
Get
that's right.
vaccinated. Not only for you, for my kid, for my grandmother, for whoever is immunocompromised. And I feel like we just still can't get it, right? We have become so, it's all about the individual, which.
Well, that's America, the rugged individualism.
Yes.
Please don't up by your
How many?
bootstraps.
Wait, almost a million of us died. I mean, can we get the memo that we are interconnected? It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think because that is what America's always been about,
Yes.
right? The rise of the individual. But if we've ever needed each other more, it's now.
Like if we didn't learn that lesson as one silver lining from the past 2 years, it was truly a waste.
2 years.
Truly a waste. And speaking about the pandemic, I would love to just add, around birth is that what we also realized on the brokenness of our health system, that we were forcing people who are not sick to go into buildings made for sick people, right?
Yes.
A birthing person, someone who's pregnant is not sick. Right?
Yes.
And in every other country, all over Twitter, Instagram, you saw midwives were in hotels.
Yeah.
They had no problem. It was crazy what
And then we had
happened.
the one person policy,
That's right.
putting women of color even in more danger because
Right.
they couldn't have their doulas or their advocates
Right.
or their partners.
But this folly of only really having hospital births, like we don't have enough
Yes.
childbirth centers.
Choices.
We don't have enough
birthing centers,
midwives who are legally allowed to do
Yeah.
home births. The fact that we don't have these many options, which is a question about money and cost, within the pandemic showed that this was ridiculous, right? And what happened to birthing people because they are forced to go to a place for
More
sick
birthing
people.
women died last year.
Yeah.
Unnecessarily.
And so we need more out of hospital options for those who don't need it. Not everybody really needs a hospital birth, and hopefully the pandemic can help us see that we deserve more options so that we're not actually building things in parking lots for people to give birth outside, which was happening because no one had thought that actually birth can happen outside of a hospital setting.
Yes. But
And I don't mean the parking lot. I mean
Yes.
something actually more established.
But you know what
Crazy.
blows my mind? Even me. I'm like, wow, women have choices giving birth. Who knew? I
And you know
did
what
not
was worse
know.
was so many people were contacting me like, we have rights, we have rights.
We
There
do.
are no rights. There was no law to prevent
No.
you from birthing alone during the pandemic. There was no laws.
Can you imagine?
No laws. Everybody thought. So I mean, certainly there's a human rights framework, but there is no law.
Wearing a mask by yourself, giving birth in a hospital in a pandemic. I mean, some of the women I spoke to in my book, their trauma, I'm traumatized by their trauma.
Absolutely.
You can't do that. And by the way, if this was men, forget it. Right?
Yeah.
No way.
Right. This would have been fixed a long time ago.
Yes, including a week after your period every month. Paid leave.
Talk about the pain gap. I mean,
Talk about the pain gap. Seriously.
well, this has been
Rachel is
such
cutting
an
us off.
amazing-
Or she wants to cut her head off.
No. I'm reacting to this, and also the fact that you're also like, this is hilarious. And but your the black humor here is super on point. I just wanted to see if there's any questions, and I have one.
Okay.
Ooh.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So you really hit on something when you talk about this sense of individualism and how people think that they've done their research or they're going to be fine. I think there is a sense of what can happen to me. There's always a sense of it could happen to me. What can individual women, individual people do here to change this culture? And what's the number one thing you would recommend people who are like aghast at the words coming out of your mouth, as I am, to do to change this culture? Because I gave birth, I had an emergency C-section, I had complications that went undiagnosed, I had pain that was not believed. So I'm familiar with the phenomenon, but every time it's so individualized. Like, what can we do to move this needle?
Thank you. I tell you, first of all, this is something that was I was shocked when someone told me this, and it's advice that I give in my book. But if you don't feel comfortable with your doctor, at any moment, even before you give birth, you can switch providers. I never knew this. I was always trying to be a really perfect patient, like a perfect student. I was trying to be like an A patient. But there's no such thing. It's not your fault. I feel like women, I mean, even when I was actually dying in childbirth in America, one of the top hospitals, by the way, in Washington, I kept telling myself, I'm not going to die in America. I just kept saying that to myself, even though I was dying giving birth in America. I wish I had spoken up. I never spoke up.
Yeah.
I never ever spoke up, and this a-hole doctor, okay, who after 30 hours of labor, okay, 3 of which I spent pushing, when I got to the emergency C-section to the operating room in a stretcher, he wanted me to walk over to the operating table on my own. He didn't believe that my pain was that bad that I couldn't walk. I literally couldn't walk, and my baby is, by the way, halfway.
Right, like
And
that's
I
an
was
arm.
so polite to him. I was like, no, I can't. And then finally he was like, okay, fine, I believe you. And, everyone kind of helped me. And I think about that man every day. And me, I don't know if you can tell, but I will speak up if something is wrong. But I didn't. And I think about what I could say to that man, every day. But also, there's only so much you can do when you're medically compromised, right? When you're in an operating theater. So I feel like if you ever see a red flag with your doctor, change providers, have somebody there with you. I really hate giving this advice, but it's in my book, and women told me this repeatedly, that taking a male friend or having a male there with you really helps for you to be believed, for you to get help earlier. Having a male that can advocate on your behalf, which I also think doulas can do for you, but I was repeatedly told by really big feminists, by the way, and I was like, I don't want to include that sexist advice in my book. But the amount of feminists, writers, and advocates that told me that's something that they did, and that was helpful. So take somebody with you.
Take somebody with you. And I think I want to go even deep, well, you really covered that level. And I want to kind of speak to us as a womankind level to really think about the things that we are told and sold are about as being important, right? Because I feel like the ways that we clamor over, Spanx or our makeup quality and, just things around beauty that we will fight and share and tell everybody, no, that sucks, no, that's great, blah, blah, blah. There are certain things that we've been told and sold on that we should demand for better for, right? But when it comes to this thing,
There's so much silence.
we've been told and sold on being silenced. And so what I really want us to do, as women, femmes, people, to think about this on a much deeper level, right? And that there's a reason why you didn't feel like someone sharing that story, but you would be on Instagram every day talking about a lip gloss. You know what I'm saying?
Totally.
Or your
shoes,
your
a bra,
your new girdle, your bra,
everything.
everything.
Tampons.
A new diet thing,
Yeah.
right? These are the things that have been commercialized around women. Meanwhile, these issues around our health, our reproductive health, we have been silenced on it. So I think it's up to us to make sure that we tell those stories, that we shout, we share on all the platforms, all the things about these issues. I think that is really important to know, one, that you're not alone, right? And that other people are seeing this, and that our collective voices have power. And that is always my, kind of mission. So one of the things that you can do is really just share your experience and start shouting about it, good, bad, indifferent, so that people know the spectrum. I hate it when people, have a bad experience. I did not know. That feels like a failure, right? It's one thing to say, I know, but I don't think it's going to happen to me. That's cool.
Yeah.
But to not know what women across the board are facing in the maternity care system in the U.S., for me, is that's not okay. Like, we all should know. We should think about being prepared. Get rid of your doctor. I always say, especially the Black women, have a joke. I'm like, treat your doctor like your hairstylist, right? If they're not coming through like they're going to do a good job, they are out of there. They are out of there. You have questions to ask. If you see one sign of something not right, you are gone. You are like, no, girl, we're not doing that. And so we really need to take a similar ad. We have to take our consumerist approach. We live in a consumer-led healthcare system, which has many failures, but that could be to our advantage for those who can. We also understand that some people cannot even have options, and perhaps for those, you can maybe find a doula. I always recommend that nosy auntie who asks a lot of questions. Everybody has one, but somebody to be there with you, and to serve in that advocacy role, because it's not the time for you to be trying to figure out how to save yourself.
Yeah, really.
And
And also maternal health is important, but I want to quickly say about heart disease, which is the leading killer of women in America, that women don't experience heart attacks like men do.
Yes.
This is thought of as such a male disease, and because men have heart attacks in the movies, like with their chest pain, but women don't. We feel nauseous, we have pain in our neck, shooting pain up our arm, and in fact, in America, a woman is 5 times more likely to be dismissed mid-heart attack because people don't know you're having a heart attack, including people at the emergency room. So please read up on heart disease and what the symptoms are for women, because it's very different.
And isn't it true that even like the dummies that they were using to teach CPR and
were
don't
on
have
men,
breasts
yes.
and
Heart disease is actually, yes, it has been studied on women
Yeah.
recently. It's very recent.
all of it is a hot mess, as they say.
A hot mess. We need more women looking into what's happening in healthcare so we can complain about it, and then fix it.
Yes. And I think we can.
I think we can too. I know we can.
We know we have the tools. We know we have the expertise.
We're so
We
smart.
know we have the advocacy. Let's just get it done.
You two are incredible. Can we just put you in charge of fixing everything,
Yes,
please?
now we are in charge.
I am so grateful for this conversation. I'm so grateful for what you've shared. I really feel like if even one person takes away a little bit of, I should look after myself, and applies that knowledge when they need it, like this, I mean, can you imagine the changes that can be made with this talk, with talks like this, and with this book that everybody should be buying and sending to their doctor. Happy holidays. Please read this. And also really just advocating for yourself, advocating for your family, advocating for your community. Wow, I'm so grateful. I really also think thank you for also pointing out this is a shared responsibility. It's not only the responsibility of women of color, Black women, to shout this from the rooftops. If one more man, when I wear the sweater, asks me if this is a ram. No. Oh, it's happening. Oh, it's happening.
Know about these
Is that a
words.
ram? How do they know what a ram looks like? Anyhow,
Of course they know what a ram looks like, but not the uterus.
I wore this to be thematic,
This
but
is
also,
where you came from, sir.
but I think there's so much good we can do, and it really starts with uplifting your voices, your work. Thank you so much. We are so happy to have you here at SaksWorks. And please come back. We have so much great programming. And you can come and have a complimentary, sign up on the website for a complimentary day pass. I'll be sharing, we'll be sharing on the SaksWorks through a QR code where you can also invite a friend. Please come join us. See for yourself why you should become a member. Because we have amazing programming like this, but it doesn't get better than this. This is the gold standard, and thank you both so very much.
So
We're really so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you again.